My name is Beverly. My husband always said that his wine was poetry. But after he died, I learned that true poetry is a cunning plan for revenge, brewing in a quiet cottage at the edge of a vineyard. My nephew thought he had sent me to the dustbin of history. He took everything from me. My home, my business, my memories. But he forgot to take my rage. And my accountant friend.
If you like stories about justice prevailing, like and subscribe to the channel. And in the comments, share what ending you would come up with for such a person.
The air in Napa Valley was thick with the honeyed light that only comes at the end of September. Long shadows from the cypress trees fell across rows of perfectly trimmed vines, heavy with clusters of ripe grapes. I closed my eyes, breathing in the familiar scent, dust, sun, sweet juice, and a faint hint of tartness that heralded harvest time. This vineyard was not just a business. It was my life woven into every vine, every stone of the old house standing on the hill. 40 years. 40 harvests. I remembered everyone, the generous and the meager, and I remembered how my hands, then young and smooth, learned to prune, tie, and tend. Jack, my late husband, loved to say at dinner parties, "My wine is poetry in a bottle." He talked about terroir, oak barrels, tannins. He never talked about my calluses, my sleepless nights at the fermenters, how I used my intuition to guess the moment when the juice would reach the perfect balance of sugar and acidity. His funeral was quiet. Heart. Too much fatty food, stress, and good wine, as one of the guests ironically remarked. I felt a strange emptiness, not so much the bitterness of loss as the numbness of surprise. We had long lived different lives under the same roof. But he was part of the landscape of my world, and now that world had cracked. The memorial service brought everyone together, winemaker, neighbors, suppliers, old friends. The tables were laden with food and, of course, bottles with the elegant label Hearthstone Vineyards, our joint venture. The air was buzzing with hushed conversation when the lawyer, Mr. Davis, entered the living room with a thin brown leather briefcase. His appearance was a signal for silence. He spoke.
"Mrs. Beverly, I'm sorry for your loss. As you know, the late Mr. Jack was a prudent man. He left clear instructions regarding our legacy. Mr. Jack's will contains no surprises. He always believed that the future of winemaking lay with young, ambitious minds, those who can keep up with the times."
He paused, looking around at the assembled guests. His gaze slid over me and stopped on the young man by the window. Ethan, Jack's nephew. He stood casually leaning against the doorframe, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, a look of slight boredom on his handsome face.
Mr. Jack bequeathed all rights to manage the Hearthstone Vineyard, a controlling stake, and full operational decision-making authority to his nephew, Ethan Maxwell.
A deathly silence hung in the room. I felt the floor slip away from under my feet. I didn't understand. Management? Decisions? I looked at Ethan. A slight, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. He slowly straightened up and took a few steps forward toward the table. Then he turned to me. His eyes met mine, full of silent questions, incomprehension, and looming panic. And there was not a trace of warmth or sympathy in his gaze. Only cold, indifferent confidence.
"Thank you, Uncle. I will live up to your trust. Don't worry, Aunt Bev. You'll be taken care of. You'll always have a roof over your head. I've already found a nice retirement home for you. Just vacate the main house by the end of the week. I'll need the study, and I think you'll be more comfortable in the guest wing for now."
Someone in the room coughed quietly. I couldn't take my eyes off Ethan's calm, smug face. I didn't hear the lawyer's words anymore. All I heard was a quiet, growing hum in my ears, and I felt the walls of my world, my life, crumbling in absolute, deafening silence. The guest wing smelled of dust and loneliness. I watched silently as two movers hired by Ethan carried in my modest boxes and placed them in the middle of the small living room. I didn't let them unpack them, it was the only thing I could still control. Put them there, by the wall. Carefully. "Thank you." My voice sounded hollow, as if coming from another room. I didn't cry. The numbness was replaced by an icy bitterness that froze everything inside. I walked through the cramped rooms, touching the worn upholstery of the sofa with my hand, peeking into the small kitchen with a view of the backyard instead of the endless rows of grapevines. It wasn't a home. It was a cage. Ethan watched my move from the porch of the main house, leaning against the doorframe with a cup of coffee in his hand. He didn't smile, his face expressing only businesslike satisfaction.
"Settled in, Bev?" If anything, my door is always open to discuss your maintenance. I've already talked to a great place for people your age, Silver Pines. They have apartments available. Excellent care. Think about it.
I turned away, pretending not to hear. I saw Ethan's new manager walking toward the main house, briskly jotting something down on his tablet. His crackdown began the next day. The first to be laid off was Martha, the accountant who had worked at the vineyard for 20 years. She came to the wing with her eyes red from crying and a box of her belongings.
He said I didn't fit the new financial strategies, that everything would be automated. Beverly, he fired me without severance pay. He says my pension should cover it.
Then Ethan gathered all the workers. I heard snippets of his speech coming through the open window. Inefficiency, outdated methods, optimization. By noon, several of the oldest workers, those who remembered how I planted the first vines, silently left the premises with their heads bowed. Their places were taken by people hired on temporary contracts with blank, unfamiliar faces. The climax was his announcement of the cancellation of the Harvest Festival. It was Hearthstone's main tradition. Once a year, we opened our doors to neighbors, friends, and regular customers. There was music, tastings, and tours of the cellars. Jack loved this day. He beamed as he accepted compliments. But I was always the heart and soul of the holiday. I baked pies, wrapped little souvenirs, and personally thanked each guest. Ethan gathered the remaining employees and, without even looking at me, declared,
Holidays are an irrational waste of time and resources. This year, we are focusing on shipments to large chains. No entertainment.
That evening, I sat on a wobbly chair in my new kitchen and looked out the window. I saw no way out. I didn't have the strength to resist Ethan's pressure. His money, his ruthlessness. All that was left was to give up. To leave quietly, preserving the last remnants of my dignity. I reached for the top shelf of the cupboard, where there was a box of old photographs that I hadn't had time to sort through. I wanted to find some comfort in the past. But the box swayed and its contents spilled onto the floor with a dull thud. Among the yellowed photographs and postcards, a thick folder labeled Personal fell to the floor. I frowned. I didn't remember putting anything important in there. Mechanically picking it up, I opened it. Inside, under a layer of old bills and clippings, lay a single document, yellowed with a blue stamp. A deed to a small, abandoned house at the far end of the estate, the one that had once served as a refuge for the first manager. Jack had given it to me on our 25th wedding anniversary, jokingly calling it my personal castle. Then we forgot about it. And there, in the owner column, my name was written in black and white. Beverly Janes. I reread it 3 times. My heart suddenly began to beat with a new, strange force. Not from fear, but from something sharp and forgotten. Ethan owned the vineyard. But not this land. Not this piece of it. I went to the window and looked in the direction where the little house should have been, behind the hill. It wasn't visible, but it was there. And that was something. Not a way out yet, but no longer a dead end. Morning found me with a cup of strong coffee, which I had brewed on my old electric stove. Yesterday's discovery had kept me awake all night, fragments of thoughts spinning around in my head, some frightening, some offering faint hope. The document lay on the table, as if radiating a quiet, unshakable confidence that I myself so sorely lacked. I had to see this place. Waiting for the moment when Ethan and his new team left for a meeting with suppliers, I threw on an old work cardigan and went out. The road to the far section had long been untrodden and overgrown with thorny bushes. The thorns clung to my clothes as if trying to hold me back, to dissuade me from this venture. My heart ached with tension, but I kept going, clutching a crumpled piece of paper with faded ink in my pocket, my only shield against the world. And then it appeared. Not a castle, of course. A small, crooked gray stone house with a tiled roof that had collapsed in places and a single boarded-up window. The door hung on a single hinge. Inside, it smelled of mold, dust, and the past. But it was my mold. My past. I walked around my new property. The tiny plot of land around the house was abandoned but surprisingly intact. An old apple tree bent its branches to the ground, covered with small, unfamiliar fruits. Wild rosemary grew by the stone fence. Suddenly, a strange feeling came over me. Not joy, no. Rage. Quiet, cold, all-consuming rage. I clenched my fists as I looked at my new home. Ethan in his mansion with panoramic windows. And me here, in the ruins given to me out of mercy 20 years ago. I went inside, pushing open the creaking door. A ray of light from a hole in the roof fell on the old fireplace, littered with brushwood and bird feathers. And at that moment I saw it. Not what was there. What could be there? A corner for an armchair by the fireplace. A shelf for my books on winemaking. A small cellar that could be cleared out and used for experimenting with small batches of wine. My wine. I stepped outside, no longer feeling the heaviness in my legs. My anger crystallized into something solid and unchanging. I took out my phone, an old flip phone that Ethan contemptuously called a dinosaur. With difficulty, poking with one finger, I found the number in my memory. Martha? It's Beverly. I have a proposal. And a place to meet. I hung up and looked at the crooked little house. It wasn't just the last frontier. It was my stronghold. Small, unassuming, and completely impregnable. The wind carried the sound of a truck from the main courtyard. Ethan was coming back. I didn't hide. I straightened my back and slowly walked back to the wing. Feeling my nephew's invisible but no longer all-powerful gaze on my back, I had a key in my pocket. Not the door key, that had been lost long ago. The key to my war. And I had just made the first call to my army. The silence in the old guardhouse was deafening, broken only by the rustling of papers and the flickering screen of an old laptop that Martha had somehow managed to connect to mobile internet. The smell of mold now mingled with the aroma of strong coffee and an electrifying sense of mission. Martha and I, now not just victims, but a two-person board of directors of retribution, sat at a rough wooden table. The center of the universe was that very folder with the deed, and everything we had managed to dig up during the day. Martha took off her glasses and rubbed her nose. Her gaze was heavy. She said,
He's not just rude and ambitious. He's stupid. Or too cocky. He thinks all accountants are robots, especially the old ones. He's not optimizing production, Bev. He's destroying it. Right here. He buys cheap grape concentrate from Argentina. Instead of waiting for our harvest, he mixes it with our juice. It makes 10 times more bottles, but it's not Hearthstone anymore. It's chemical syrup. I tried what they're bottling now. It tastes like wood. The acidity burns your throat. Jack is turning in his grave. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. He's not just spoiling the wine. He's selling it under our brand, our name. Your name, Bev. And he's overcharging retailers 3 times the price and pocketing the difference by falsifying documents. This isn't incompetence. This is a criminal offense. Fraud on a grand scale.
Silence hung in the air. The word criminal hit us both like a whip. I looked at the columns of numbers, which to me were not just reports, but evidence of the desecration of everything I believed in. That I got up and walked over to the small, dusty window. I looked toward the mansion where the lights were on. Now it was not just the enemy's house. It was a potential crime scene. That I no longer felt like a victim. I felt like an investigator. A hunter. Okay. My voice sounded in the silence of the guardhouse with a new, frightening firmness. Let's say it's true. We need proof. Not assumptions. Facts. I turned to Martha. My eyes were burning.
Martha, dig deeper. Find those fake invoices, the connection to the front companies. Everything you can.
Ethan wasn't paranoid. He was pragmatic. And his pragmatism told him that a quiet, submissive aunt who had suddenly moved into a dilapidated house on the edge of the estate and showed no signs of life was not normal. This calm smelled like a storm. And Ethan didn't like storms. They interfered with business. His new manager, the fiercely ambitious Lisa, confirmed his fears.
The old accountant, Martha, has been seen several times in the area of the old guardhouse. Are they celebrating something there? Or plotting something?
That was enough. Waiting for these old women to do something was not his style. He had to act preemptively. Hard and fast. Their attack began the next morning. A loud knock on the door pulled me out of my thoughts about the papers. 2 burly workers in hard hats and with chainsaws in their hands were standing on the doorstep. Behind them, with her arms akimbo, stood Lisa.
Mrs. Janes. Mr. Maxwell has ordered the sanitary felling of dangerous trees on the property. Your cottage is in the work zone. For your own safety, you must temporarily leave the premises.
This is my land. I tried to protest, but my voice was drowned out by the roar of the chainsaw.
Your land is a few meters around the foundation. The trees are on the vineyard property. Our property.
They didn't touch the cottage itself. They started cutting down the old apple tree, the one that grew on the border between the plots. The tree under which Jack and I once drank our first wine. It crashed down with a deafening crash, hitting the roof and scattering splinters and leaves all around. The workers started on the wild rosemary and the bushes by the fence. An hour later, my plot was cordoned off with a pile of freshly cut branches, and the approach to it was blocked by a tractor. It was a demonstrative humiliation. A warning. That evening, Martha's home was raided with a surprise tax audit. Someone had anonymously reported her illegal private practice. She had to spend half a day showing documents and making excuses. Ethan didn't know anything specific yet, but he made it clear that he was the boss here, and he could make our lives unbearable without even touching us directly. I sat on the steps of my house, looking at the destroyed garden. Rage boiled in my chest. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, all-consuming hatred. He didn't just want to destroy me. He wanted to wipe out everything that was dear to me, to desecrate my memory. That I looked at the burning windows of the mansion. Now it wasn't just a war for justice. It was a war of annihilation. And I had to respond. Not with defense. With attack. I went into the house, took out my old phone and dialed Martha's number. "They've crossed the line," I said without preamble, my voice calm and terrifying. "The game of hide and seek is over. Find everything you can find. Any dirt. Any clue. Now we strike first." I hung up the phone. The plan for revenge, which had previously been abstract, now took on a clear, cruel form. Ethan wanted war. He would get it. The silence in the guardhouse the next day was ominous. The air, which yesterday had been filled with my anger and determination, today was thick and heavy, like before a storm. Martha and I sat at the table, which was covered with printed screenshots of emails and transcripts of phone calls that she had risked retrieving from the old corporate email account to which she still had access. Martha said,
"Look, he's not just buying concentrate. He's buying it through a front company in an offshore zone. And he's selling it to Hearthstone at the price of elite raw materials. He's putting the difference into his personal account. This isn't even double-entry bookkeeping, it's primitive theft."
I silently studied the numbers. Each line was a nail in Ethan's coffin. But that wasn't enough. I needed something more. Something that would attract the attention of not only accountants, but also law enforcement. "What's this?" I pointed to the recurring account number in Singapore.
That's his alternate airfield. He's been transferring money there for over a year. Apparently, he was planning to flee when everything collapsed. Silly boy. He thought he was a genius who had invented a perpetual motion machine for money laundering.
Suddenly, there was a knock at the window. We both jumped. I went to the curtain and peeked out cautiously. A young man was standing on the doorstep, one of the few remaining old workers, Juan. He was holding a bottle without a label in his hands.
"Senora Beverly, this is for you. From the winery. New. The ones for the chains. Mr. Ethan ordered the whole batch to be disposed of. Says it's defective. But I thought you should see this. It's not defective. It's poison."
I took the bottle. The wine inside was cloudy with an unnatural pinkish tinge. I uncorked it and sniffed it. A sharp chemical smell hit my nose. "Thank you, Juan." My voice was hoarse. "Go. And make sure no one sees you were here." When he left, I put the bottle on the table next to Martha's papers. 2 pieces of evidence. 2 threads leading to one person. Martha said quietly,
"That's enough. We can go to the police with this. And the FDA. They'll destroy him."
"No," I shook my head. My eyes burned with cold fire. "The police will take too long. Court's lawyers. He'll get away with it. He has money for good lawyers." "No." I went to the shelf and took my old notebook. It contained my contacts. Not accountants and lawyers. Journalists. Critics. Owners of small but influential wine boutiques. People whose words meant something in this world. He's not just destroying us. He's destroying the legacy of Hearthstone. The name we've built over decades. He's poisoning people. I looked at the bottle of cloudy liquid. Let him answer to more than a court. Let him answer to the whole world. I handed Marta my phone. "Find out everything you can about this shell company and the Singapore account, and I'll organize a little tasting." My voice had the same firmness as Jack's when he talked about his best wines. But behind it lay not pride. It was the abyss of my cold, merciless revenge. Ethan wanted to drive me out of my own land. Now I was going to drive him out of his own life. And I was going to do it in such a way that his reputation would be completely destroyed. Ethan nervously adjusted his tie, looking puzzled at the small group of people gathered at the entrance to the wine cellar. He hadn't invited these people. Tom Baker, the most scathing wine critic in the state, a couple of bloggers with huge followings, and several owners of high-end boutiques, with whom he was currently negotiating contracts, had graced us with their presence.
What unexpected guests. Unfortunately, we don't have any tastings scheduled for today.
This isn't a tasting, Mr. Maxwell. My calm, clear voice rang out. I stepped out of the shadows of the cellar, dressed in my old but immaculate dress. I clutched 2 unlabeled bottles in my hands like weapons. This is a product recall. Ethan turned pale.
Bev, what kind of stupid joke is this? You're not yourself. Lisa, call the doctor.
Joke. I raised one of the bottles, and the light from the lamp caught the cloudy liquid inside. This is the Hearthstone wine you are currently supplying to the chain, made from cheap Argentine concentrate and sodium benzoate. I turned the second bottle full of dark, noble ruby. And this is 5-year-old Hearthstone, the very one for which we received a gold medal. Let's compare. Before Ethan could do anything, I poured the cloudy pinkish liquid into glasses and handed them to the critic. The critic sniffed skeptically, took a sip, and immediately spat it out on the floor with a grimace of disgust.
Good God! This is chemical burp. It's a disgrace. You sell this under the Hearthstone brand?
A stunned silence hung in the air. Bloggers immediately began filming everything on their phones. I could feel his armor of arrogance cracking with every click of the camera. Ethan's voice trembled.
This is a lie. Slander. She's crazy. She's trying to discredit me.
Discredit you? I took a step forward, my voice loud and clear as I addressed the crowd. You disgraced yourself. You stole. You forged documents. You transferred money to an account in Singapore through a shell company called Cayman Vine Import. You poisoned people with this filth. Ethan froze. I saw his eyes widen in shock as he tried to figure out how I knew about Singapore, about Cayman Vine. His confidence crumbled in an instant, and the sight was sweeter than any wine.
You can't know that. You have no proof.
And at that moment, as if on my secret command, Martha approached the group. Silently, she raised a stack of printouts above her head. Financial documents, account statements, contracts with his signature. Silent, irrefutable evidence of his downfall. Proof, I said in an icy tone, looking him straight in the eye. Here it is. All your dirty accounting. Every forged signature. Everything. He stared at the papers in silent horror. His empire of lies collapsed in a minute and a half. I saw Tom Baker take out his notebook, and the owner of the largest boutique turn and walk away, making no attempt to hide his contempt. It was a collapse. Complete and utter.
You've all been deceived. That old hag and her friend. They forged these papers.
But it was too late. Phones were buzzing, recording his humiliation, his reputation, his business, his future. Everything was turning to dust before his eyes. I looked at him, not hiding my triumph. I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked deeper into the cellar, into the cool shade, leaving him alone in the center of a scandal that by morning would be known throughout the wine community. My revenge was complete, cold, calculated, and public. Ethan was destroyed. Not by force, not by money, but by the truth. And it was the sweetest victory. A year later, the air in Napa Valley was once again filled with that special September light. But now it smelled not of grief and betrayal, but of peace and the sweet smoke from my fireplace. Ethan Maxwell's mansion stood boarded up. After a loud scandal, exposure of financial fraud, and the launch of an FDA investigation, his business had fallen into complete decline. The vineyard was sold at auction to pay off debts. The new owners, a large chain, did not keep the old name. Hearthstone Vineyards sank into oblivion, but at the far end of the valley, on that very rocky patch that had been my salvation and my fortress, a new, modest but proud sign now stood. Vindictive Vineyards. My little house had been renovated. Its walls were now painted a warm color, curtains hung in the windows, and a new young apple tree grew at the entrance, a promise of future harvests. Next to it stood a neat shed workshop, which housed all the necessary equipment for producing small batches of elite wine. My wine. I went out onto the porch with 2 glasses in my hands. I handed one to Marta, who was comfortably seated in a wicker chair. To the harvest, I smiled, and our glasses clinked softly that we didn't become rich. Our vineyard was tiny. Our wine a niche product for true connoisseurs willing to pay for the history, quality, and soul invested in each bottle. Vindicta wine became a local legend, not only because of its taste, but also because of the story behind its creation. I was no longer a shadow living in the past. I was the mistress of my land, my destiny, and my legacy. I sometimes received news from Ethan. He was trying to start a new business in another state, but the shadow of scandal haunted him. I felt neither pity nor malice towards him. He simply ceased to exist for me. I looked at my hands, still gnarled and stained with dirt. But now they were the hands of a creator, not a hired worker. A mistress who had gone through fire and emerged not with ashes, but with grapes ready to become great wine. I turned and looked at my small but sturdy and cozy house. At my vineyard. At my friend. This was not the life I had once dreamed of. It was the life I had fought for and built myself. And it was beautiful.